Thank you, Leslie, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. I'm just going to hopefully go forward. What I do is not unique, it's fairly rare that you find a sustainable development professional who has taken on the economic side, has come from the environment side as such and gone into the economic development side. So the purpose of this morning, what I wanted to do is reflect back on what I learnt and what happened in Johannesburg. I was only doing my MSc in Sustainable Development at the last at the Rio Summit originally, so it was part of an awful lot of what I developed and used in my professional career going forward. So I just want to reflect on what happened in terms of the outcomes from Johannesburg 8 years ago, and also just to provide a few thoughts to stimulate what is the green economy. That's obviously the theme for this morning and this afternoon, is what is a green economy, and I want to use that for what does that mean for Scotland. Clearly you're all from very different backgrounds, and my background is clearly local government, but that doesn't mean that we can't all reflect to each other about how we actually make this happen, because not one person is ever going to manage to drive the green economy. Right, I had a slide which had a picture of a man saying, with a stamp on his forehead from Johannesburg. I didn't use it, probably should have, since Leslie used for one of hers. No more shameful summits. And that was generally what happened at the end of Johannesburg. There was a feeling that everyone had been let down. Now, there was 35,000 official delegates, that's government delegates, really, who were negotiating and discussing. There were 58 heads of state who turned up, and there was 40,000 civil society people turned up. And their role really was to try and campaign to the 37,000 people that were representing their countries what they actually wanted. And the outcome, of course, was generally a disappointment that far more could have been achieved at Johannesburg. It's worth probably remembering this was just before the invasion of Iraq, and that actually dominated discussions quite a lot. There was a few, and so Leslie's made the point about arms and things like that. That was part of actually a feeling that was going through, is that the world was going to be overtaken by another war, which clearly for some of us it's become quite a dominant part of our lifestyles to know that that's part of our everyday news items. So that was the background about what was happening. There was 4 main events that really happened in Johannesburg. There was the main event, which was where all the negotiations were happening. There was a civil society event and a forum for that. There was a local government forum where they were discussing Local Agenda 21, and I'll come on to that in a minute. And there was a Business Action for Sustainable Development forum. And a lot of the more side events probably produced a lot more commitments. Now, whether they've actually happened or not is probably something that's worth reflecting upon. But let's think about some of the positive things that have happened since we probably discussed the ideas in since 1992 and through to 2002 and onwards. Corporate social responsibility has sort of come out of the closet, hasn't it? It's not just something that you stick in your annual statement from a company. It now has a much more mainstream activity among most companies and across a lot of the public sector as well. It's not necessarily that it's there yet, but it has happened. The low carbon economy, I spend, well, clearly given that I work in renewables, I spend quite a lot of time talking about low carbon economy. It's now become, again, a mainstream discussion point among business people and among quite a lot of politicians. They talk about the low carbon economy. How can we achieve it? Where are we going? So that's one of the big areas of change. Particularly for those of us here in Europe, legislation on the environmental side, in terms of waste, energy, transport, there's quite a lot of change has happened. A lot of us will say it's not fast enough, but it has happened. Procurement, more accounting has gone on for what well-being has come out. The best value regime in Scotland, for example. Those sort of things have happened also in that time. And one of the areas that I'm pretty pleased about is that we have, probably through our education system, ensured that a lot of young people who are going into business now actually understand the environment, they understand the community aspects, so they're actually hopefully coming out of eco-school programs and going in and demanding that their companies are far more conscious of what they do. But, there's always the but, there's still an awful lot that we have to do. On August the 21st this year, that was Earth Overshoot Day. I don't know how many of you heard this. This is the ecological accounting. Basically, they worked out that the world overshot its resources for this year on August the 21st. That means that we are now living on next year's resources, and they will obviously get shorter and shorter as we go along. So clearly, we are not able to live within our means. The three planet living that a lot of people are feeling that they personally live in, we have to get down to the one planet living. So that's the reflection of what happened in the past. Now, Felix in his presentation made reference to Agenda 21, and while the term Agenda 21 may have gone off the boil, it is still probably one of the best concepts, Chapter 28, particularly for those of us in Scotland and those of us in the public sector, is that the idea was in Agenda 21, the people closest to making things happen are actually local government or the public sector. I mean, don't forget, in most other countries, the local government runs an awful lot of the services that we in the public sector in Scotland run. And this was, and still is, probably still the most important thing to think of. How can we influence business, companies, people, day-to-day lifestyles? Governments in Westminster or in Holyrood will be making policies and laws, but actually the implementation changes happen on the ground. And that was the whole concept behind Agenda 21. Every local authority in the UK was required to have a local Agenda 21. And a lot of those have been forgotten probably, or subsumed within community planning regimes, or generally need quite a lot of refreshment. So maybe again that's part of what we want to look forward to, saying that's what Scotland needs, is a refresh. I'm not worried about the terminology, that just gets people occupied about it. It's about what is it that actually we want to see happen on the ground. The stool that I've got there, the three-legged stool, is what many of you in sustainable development have used as a concept. Is that it's the community, the economy, and the environment of the three-legged stool, and at the top we get sustainable development. Personally speaking, I have found that we never reach the top there, and this is somebody in a profession that was put together. I would say as someone who's did economic development and sustainable development, I was grasping onto two of those legs. I never managed to even get to the third. Instead of jumping right to the top and working out how to do it, that was what happened. Is we and most of us probably, I would guess, find ourselves hanging onto one of those siloed legs. We're not actually reaching the top. So that's the whole concept going forward for, obviously, 2012, is that hopefully we'll be sitting at the top, working out how to do all the other bits on the legs. So, what is a green economy? Now, there is no one definition of what is a green economy, and I've seen various ideas of what it is. So what I'm going to use is the one that's been used by UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, and it's come out of a document they've produced, which Ruth put into on the website. There's actually a link and you can get through to this. I'm afraid I didn't print it off, and I'm really sorry I did, because the writing was so small. It's clearly designed that you're only meant to read it online. This is quite a good, stimulating document. It's a preview report about what we're looking for in a green economy by the time we get to the level of UN discussions. And it's about a green economy within sustainable development. They're really, I think the concept is to try and hold on to, this is not just about renewables, just because that's the flavour of the month. Now, personally speaking, I think that's great. It is the flavour of the month, and clearly Leslie is as well. But it has to be with the concept, what is it we're trying to achieve, and why are we trying to go there? So, if we assume that a green economy is defined as an economy that results in the improved human well-being and reduces the inequalities, sorry, it's fallen off the end there, over the long term, while not exposing future generations to significant environmental risks and ecological scarcities. Sort of comes back to Agenda 21, back to the concept of stool, so it's all there. Now, jumping slightly back to when the previous discussions, the green economy, or the economy as the driver for sustainable development, this is fairly recent within sustainable development discussions, and certainly at Johannesburg, it was assumed, well, the businesses can just meet and do their thing. No one was there to influence business or company at the time. This is going to be something that's new. And why is it new? Why did we ever think that a green economy could just happen because everyone wanted it? What we've become is very reliant on services, and as we all know, in the public sector, that's going to become, the services are going to diminish. So the green economy really, for all sorts of reasons, is going to be one of the clear and catalytic things that actually will make sustainable development happen. However, words have a however or a but, I'm afraid, got to be really clear, the business community are a tough bunch of people. They go into business to make money. They don't go into business to save the environment and the world. Some of them maybe are going there and they're coming in from a different door, but the majority are really there to do it. So there's a lot of skepticism out there potentially. We're going to have to fight the greenwash. Looks good on back to the business annual plan. There's the economic model itself. Now, I am not an economist, but from what I watch, it's going to be very hard to change. Even though we have a banking crisis, we have worldwide recession, it's the economic model hasn't changed radically enough to say that's sustainable development, and that's going to be one of the big areas to influence. It's very reliant on the leadership within a company, and companies are very hierarchical. Whoever is the president or the CEO is the person that's driving the theme in that company. And if you're not getting leadership on sustainable development in that company, that's going to be very difficult. So we've got to be realistic about that. But the other area would be is that, I think that a lot of people who started in the sustainable development profession, from whichever background you came from, were slightly naive that businesses would come along. I think there's going to have to be a lot more work to do a lot more influencing and a lot more work with companies basically to bring them forward. So what are the answers? That's the important point, isn't it? That's where we want to go to today. I'm going to use what the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, who actually came out of the Rio and Johannesburg, they actually were part of. So they are a grouping of 200 international companies who are basically a think tank and trying to stimulate that influencing on how to make a green economy. So the first thing they're talking about is a transition to a more inclusive, low-carbon, resource-efficient economy. This is where we go back to that point I made about corporate social responsibility, procurement, all have really important elements to ensure that that's actually happening. The next one is development will not be sustainable and poverty cannot be alleviated without business engagement. It's really, and I think this is one of, for me, and I was thinking about this for this morning, that's one of the hardest bits to get. It's not just about doing a bit of nice work for a day out with the company. It's going to have to be something else. And when I was working with my economic development team a few years ago, and they were fairly new to me and I was new to them, and I said, so what's the most satisfying thing you have in your entire career in economic development? And they all thought about it, and then they all came back with their own individual stories, and every single one of those was about working in a deprived community where they'd been able to go in, either provide new skills, save a post office in one person's case. So that actually is something that really stimulates quite a lot of people in economic development, but we don't tend to see it because it's the quiet stuff that happens underneath. So for me, there's about how do you, that's it, and then you cannot have a sustainable world without alleviating poverty and people being involved and economically positive in the way that they engage in the world. Dynamic leadership, I mentioned that in terms of the CEO of a company. It's so critical, and I think in Scotland that's the thing that we really have an awful lot of desire for. We want leadership and we'd like to see it actually happening. And I'm sure many of you would have stories about where you see it or where you don't see it, and maybe today the thing is to bring out the good examples to show how that actually can be influenced somewhere else.